Let's bring in our guest, Paul Dergarabedian. He is a senior media analyst at Comscore. And Paul, we've heard the warnings from the likes of AMC saying they don't know if they can make it through January, given the downturn and the financial pain they have been put in. But you say the rumors of the demise of the movie theaters has been greatly exaggerated.
Absolutely. It's really interesting too, because we had a record box office year in 2019, $42.5 billion earned around the world. This year, it's going to be more like $11.5 billion globally. So it's really taken a downturn. Obviously, though, everything's shut down basically March 20, that Friday, March 20. That was when theaters essentially closed. At that point, we were running ahead of 2019. We were doing really well. We had Bad Boys for Life that did much better than expected. And Invisible Man, one of the best movies of the year. It doesn't seem like forever ago when that came out. That movie was doing really well, and then it got sidelined, and a lot of movies went to streaming immediately, and a lot of movies were moved down the slate into later 2020 or even 2021, which is almost here.
Yeah, that's kind of the big, I guess, cause for concern is how much longer some of those big blockbusters will continue to get pushed back, or how many will get released on streaming platforms, because we know that these theaters are so desperate to draw people back in.
Oh, I know, Zach. It's really been a tough call, because for theaters, they need two things to happen. They need a really strong pandemic response in whatever country, city, town they're in. And then they also need new movies, big movies to draw people in. And if you don't have that, that's really tough on the bottom line. I think the big picture here is that how many theaters will be able to weather this storm? I know they'll be back. I'm very confident about that. I'm very bullish on the future of the movie theater. But this has been months of the box office just being really decimated. And the North American box office is running about 80% behind 2019. That's really tough. And when a movie like Wonder Woman 1984 does about $16.7 million, that's cause for celebration, because that was the biggest opening during the pandemic in movie theaters, while still that movie was available on the same day that it opened in theaters on HBO Max. So people want to go, and we've seen that with drive-ins too. Drive-ins were really huge, relatively speaking, in the summer, because people wanted that communal outside of the home movie theater experience, or big screen experience, I should say. And that's how they got it. So really, really a tough time for the business, but a lot of big movies on the horizon. But we have to turn that corner, get to a point where we have movie theaters open to a degree that they can start generating big box office.
Well, Paul, some critics would argue that the movie theaters were slow to act even before the pandemic, when the shift was inevitably moving towards streaming, making requirements, for example, that certain films needed to have a certain amount of a run in theaters before they actually went to streaming. How do you think that conversation shifts? Assuming that these major movie theaters do survive, how does the business model shift?
You make a great point, because what you're talking about is the window between when a film opens in theaters and when it's available on home video or on streaming. And what that's done for the industry, for the theater industry, is given it a prestige and an exclusivity, because you have to wait to see a movie at home. So people go out to the theater, see a big blockbuster, and they're like, wow, in a couple of months or maybe 3 months, I'll be able to get that movie at home. Now, those dynamics, and literally it's a dynamic window now, are changing. And depending on the movie, the type of movie, its potential for blockbuster success, I think we're going to see a carryover from this, that there will be a bigger conversation surrounding what movies go to the big screen. And then once they do, how long should they be in theaters before they then are available on streaming? That's an accelerated conversation. And now those strategies are already being accelerated. We saw that with Wonder Woman 1984. We saw it way at the beginning of the pandemic with Trolls World Tour, where that movie suddenly had to shift directly to streaming. And then, of course, Tenet opened, and Croods opened recently. And actually, those movies have done well, considering the lack of seats that are available and the lack of screens. And so that makes me feel good that people are still seeking out that experience. I think streaming and the theater will live side by side as they did in 2019. It'll look a little different, and it's going to take some time before people feel fully comfortable going back to any brick and mortar communal space.
Yeah, but Paul, it seems to me like it's kind of the cat's out of the bag when we're having this kind of friendly relationship. It's been there between the theaters and some of the larger studios, but now when you look at a Disney Plus and the idea of saving so much money and keeping more revenue, just putting it on a Disney Plus streaming platform, it seems like once you do that, it's tough to go back to the old way of doing things.
It is. The genie is somewhat let out of the bottle in that case, and it is hard to put that back. But you have to remember, too, if you have a movie like Avengers Endgame, which just last year, it seems so long ago, opened with $350 million and made almost $3 billion worldwide. How do you do that just on streaming? It's very difficult. And I know there are revenue splits between theaters and the studios, but when you're talking about movies that earn $1 billion or $2 billion plus, you do that in the movie theater, and then that builds a huge conversation around that movie, and that becomes even more valuable on streaming. But there's no denying that this has changed everything. But I think people who are jumping to this means the end of the movie theater, I think that's completely misguided. This is a business that's been sidelined, and now it's going to take some time to come back. And naturally, streaming took over. People are stuck at home. They're consuming a lot of content. But again, I point to drive-ins during the summer, getting a lot of people seeking them out. And then more recent movies like Wonder Woman 1984 doing better than expected in the movie theater.
Yeah, well, if you had told me last year that Doolittle would have been up there as a top box office performer, I would have called you crazy, but that's just how 2020's gone. Paul,
it really has. Everything's changed for sure.
Yeah, it's a nuts year that we're looking back on. Comscore Senior Media Analyst, appreciate you taking the time to chat. Be well. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Same to you, Zach and Akiko. Thank you so much.